We're about to hear from Misha, but before we do, we might kick things off with a video.
Out of the gate and off for a walk went Harry McClary from Donaldson's Dairy, and Hercules Morse, as big as a horse, with Harry McClary from Donaldson's Dairy. Bottomley pots covered in spots, Hercules Morse, as big as a horse, and Harry McClary from Donaldson's Dairy. Muffin McClay, like a bundle of hay, Bottomley pots covered in spots, Hercules Morse, as big as a horse, and Harry McClary from Donaldson's Dairy. Bitzer Maloney, all skinny and bony, Muffin McClay, like a bundle of hay, Bottomley pots covered in spots, Hercules Morse, as big as a horse, and Harry McClary from Donaldson's Dairy. Schnitzel von Krumm, with a very low tum, Bitzer Maloney, all skinny and bony, Muffin McClay, like a bundle of hay, Bottomley pots covered in spots, Hercules Morse, as big as a horse, and Harry McClary from Donaldson's Dairy. With tails in air, they trotted on down past the shops and the park to the far end of town. They sniffed at the smells and snooped at each door when suddenly, out of the shadows, they saw Scarface Claw, the toughest Tom in town. "Meow!" said Scarface Claw. Off with a yowl and a wail and a howl, a scatter of paws and a clatter of claws, went Schnitzel von Krumm with a very low tum, Bitzer Maloney, all skinny and bony, Muffin McClay, like a bundle of hay, Bottomley pots, all covered in spots, Hercules Morse, as big as a horse, and Harry McClary from Donaldson's Dairy, straight back home to bed.
Okay, Misha, that 100% worked. There's a lot of confused and excited faces in front of us now. It's my pleasure to welcome to stage Misha, who is the marketing director at Scooter Creative.
That's all right. Hello, everybody. I hope I got a few people's attention with that most favourite childhood story. What I wanted to do is use that story to talk to you about the power of storytelling to connect and to convert, and also to make sure that everyone's smiling at me before I start my presentation. So in the next 20 minutes, I'm going to talk about some examples of some really great stories in brands and businesses. Then I'm going to talk to you about a few steps on how you can create your own brand, your own story to really have an impact. So let me show you how powerful Harry McClary really is. It created connection to the story, to the reader, to those characters. It created feelings and emotion. So from that warm heart to all of those smiles on your faces out there, but also even that scared factor that we still takes us back to our childhood of the scariest Tom in town, which is Scarface McCall. It also hopefully brought back a whole lot of really good memories. It might have been you being read to, someone reading it, one of your loved ones reading it to you, you reading it to one of your loved ones, someone very special in your life. It also then created action. So without even knowing about it, you were probably marketed to as a toddler. You either had a little kid saying, "Read it again," or you were potentially buying it for the next young kid's birthday party. Or even better, I'm sure that sales of sausage dogs went up after this book came out and everybody wanted their own Schnitzel von Krumm. So really great story, really powerful. So you can start seeing how much a story can have an impact, even if it is children's books. So I'm not going to keep talking about children's books. Now I'm going to bring it back to business a little bit. How do we translate that into business? I'm going to give you a bit of an example from my professional background. I was marketing manager at this business for a while. So start with, once upon a time, there was a global sport that did not have the hearts and minds of the general Australian population. Can I get a show of hands who watches Formula One? And keep your hands up if you've watched Formula One for longer than 10 years. A few hands go down. That might be an age thing too. So between 2009 and 2015, I was General Manager of Marketing at the Australian Grand Prix Corporation. And one of our events was the Formula One Australian Grand Prix. We did everything to create some noise and get people to come along to the events. We did the full marketing mix, so you can see some happy snaps of my own that shows some advertising down in the bottom left-hand corner. We had full-page spreads in the dailies, we had pricing incentives, we had last-minute chances, we had all the big, amazing gold creative. We also did PR to launch, tell people that it was going to be here. We got a helicopter to bring a Formula One car in over the Albert Park Lake and land to launch the event for 2014. I even managed to convince the board, which some pretty impressive people around Melbourne, to let me build a giant helmet, which was 6 metres by 5 metres, that you could walk in and engage in Formula One, learn about all the rules, really get people to understand the sport. And I even looked for new markets. So a main reason why Formula One Grand Prix certainly was here back then and still today is to put Melbourne on the world stage. So I took a Formula One car for a drive, I didn't drive it, down the Great Ocean Road to really try and connect with that broader tourism audience. So you could say we created noise. We were everywhere for months leading in, so many promotions, so much PR. And we did okay. We didn't ever sell out the event during my time, but we did okay. We probably got between 350,000, 400,000 people over the 4 days. But what we didn't have was a story like Netflix told for us. So 8 years ago, Netflix came out with a series called Drive to Survive. It was the perfect Hollywood story, the drama, the glitz, the glamour, everything that tells you about what goes on in the Formula One paddock. And what that did, if I go back to that power of story again, is it created connections. So back to the drivers and their personal lives. We learned about Dan Ricciardo and his antics. We learned about Lewis Hamilton and his fashion. And we also got to meet Carlos Sainz and his little dog. So all really ways on how we could relate to these multi-trillionaires that drive around in fast cars for a living. It also showed us the emotion behind the sport. So it gave us the winning, the losing, the determination. It then allowed us to create our own memories. So we've had the watch parties. We had the event attendance. We had the water cooler chats. And all of those things that conjure up, because we've now engaged in the sport like so many others had before we knew about it, and it's through the Drive to Survive. And then the actions came from there. So Formula One has never been a bigger sport globally. It's now picked up, I don't have numbers in front of me, but it's now picked up the huge American audience, which it was struggling to get for so many years. It's picked up women. So there's so many more women that are coming along to the sport and watching it as, a sport, not because of just, what might be going off track at the Australian Grand Prix. It also brought in a whole lot of new brands. So the major sponsor for the Australian Grand Prix this year was Louis Vuitton. Amazing, like luxury global brand wanting to be a partner of the Australian Grand Prix Corporation. And when I looked around, I went out to the event and I looked around, and I can guarantee you 9 of 10 brands that were showcased on site this year at the Formula One Grand Prix would not have taken my call back in 2009. So the change that this story has done for the sport is beyond reasoning. So you can see those 4 things that the power of storytelling can really bring: that connection, the emotion, the memories, and the action. If I give you another example from your own industry, I had nothing to do with this from a marketing point of view, just admire from afar. I'm not sure if there is anyone here from 4 Pillars before I start talking about them on their behalf. They call themselves makers, not marketers, which I think is very unassuming and underselling of what they did. But really, from a maker's point of view, they were what they focused on were the things that they felt really mattered to people that wanted to buy gin. So the packaging, the brand, the ingredients, the recipe, and really owned that space rather than, doing the big glitz and glam advertising campaigns, for example. So how did they create those 4 key things? So from connection, they're mates with an idea. Don't we all have those conversations around a barbecue, around dinner table? That mates with idea create that connection back to us. They also then created connection with bars, bar owners, publicans, anyone that was potentially serving gin. They allowed those people to then have another connection with their own customers because they were giving them a different way on how to drink gin, how to taste gin, and the likes. So the emotion that created for the end consumer and for that initial business-to-business customer of theirs, the bar girl, was wonder, curiosity, potentially joy if they really enjoyed it. The memories, for me, it was the summer of 2016 to 17, drinking the gin. I remember being in Sydney and being a Melbourne girl, going into a really cool Sydney bar with my mum and saying, I just want a really nice gin. And they're like, oh, we've got this gin from Healesville, which is right near where I grew up. So that's a memory for me. And the action that it created was that people now ask for 4 Pillars gin. They drink gin with orange, which before they came about didn't happen. So that story that makers, not marketers, and the 4 guys that had an idea really connected with people. So all really good examples and potentially some examples with maybe more money than you have to put into your marketing and your story. So I wanted to really now put it back to what's in it for me. So how do you guys create that story? How do you apply these examples to your own business? But before we get into it, I will just quickly, because I know you're all here, the burning question that I always get asked as a marketer, do I need to dance on TikTok? It is, it's a little bit of an unknown world. People get a little bit frightened by that space. Keep that in mind while I go through these steps, and hopefully I'll answer it for you at the end. Okay, the first step. First step in anything you ever do, before you even think about your product, before you think about marketing or communicating what your product is to anybody, is think about who you're telling your story to. It is the absolute most important thing when it comes to marketing and the only way you'll be successful if you know who you're talking to. So if I use an analogy, if you walked into a party and you didn't know anyone, what you're going to do is you're going to try and find somebody and try and find a way to connect. So you're going to go up there and ask them, where'd you come from? What school did you go to? If you've got any kids, what are you drinking tonight? Do you like Formula One? You're going to really start trying to build up an understanding of who they are, because what you're trying to do is find a connection. So it's really important to understand your audience. You need to ask that of the customers that you want to engage with. What do you know about them? If you don't know anything about them, how are you ever going to connect? How are you going to find that thing that's relatable in order for you to have that ongoing conversation? So what marketers do when we understand more of that is we start putting you in boxes. Right? So you said, Formula One, I like going to the pub and watching the sport with my mates. Like, great. Drinks beer at pub with friends watching sport. That's one persona group. My other one said, just really love, I drink beer occasionally, not that fast, but I drink it more from, Friday night. I've got to get home from work and I'm exhausted. There's your worker. So you can see how we start putting them into groups. When we understand those groups and we understand those people, their motivations, what might stop them from drinking, what might stop them from doing whatever we're selling, that's when we can create communication that's going to really come home to them. and really have that connection. So we put them in boxes. We call them personas from a marketing jargon. And then that's how we start building our story, our brand, and our communications. So what is my story? This is where brand comes in. Everyone talks about brand, and some people go, I understand what brand is. It's actually, break it down, it's pretty simple. It's your personality. Right? We all have our own personal brand. We also, all these business owners out here, you have your own business brand. And what's that personality look like? This is where we start really breaking it down to find our story. So in terms of the story here, the best way to start is with your why. Why did you get into business? And that's 9 out of 10 brand stories do come from their why, and that will evolve as you learn, and hindsight, you can make your story even more exciting. But understanding your founder story is really key. And if I'll throw another big global brand in there, Adidas. So their founder story, which is actually their brand story today, so their founder story, I think, was the 1920s. No, maybe not. Maybe 1930s it was, sorry. Adi Dassler and his brother were cobblers. So they were cobblers in Germany, making shoes, probably making boots for the German army, to be honest. And what they then did was they had athletes that came to them and said, I want to run faster. So they started tinkering and creating shoes to help those athletes perform. So that's when the first track shoe came about, was from cobblers. So that's their story, and their story remains in that they are about performance first and helping athletes be the best they can be. That's their consistent story 100 odd years later. But it's really important to be authentic too when you're creating that story. Don't try and be someone you're not, because you'll get found out straight away, especially in this cynical world. So be honest. You can always add mayo, of course, but be honest, be true to yourself. Don't try and be someone you're not. Then it's really important too, how are you different? How's your story different? What are you doing that some of your competitors aren't doing? Now, I'll give you a way on, so it's what's called sort of finding the gap, is what we call it. So a good little workshop that you can do is actually pull all of your main competitors, put a list of your main competitors, those that are closest to what you do, and have a think about what they are perceived as doing well and what are they perceived as not doing well. Right? Get a bit of a snapshot. Start thinking about what their story might be from your perspective, but also, again, from the customer perspective. Then you can start looking and going, okay, well, where's the gap? Okay, so no one's really trying to be an expert here. Maybe that's what I can be. Maybe that's what my story needs to dial up on, that expertise. That's not to say that you are the actual number one expert in that list. But if you say it louder and you can authentically say it as part of your story, you will own that space too. So try and find the gap so that you can be different. Then it's equally important is how you say it. So in every way. So you really need that consistency of tone. I talked about authenticity. If you're not funny, don't try and be funny. If you're not too serious, don't try and be too serious. You can add professionalism, but you can also be the mate. So think about how you want to be perceived. Do you want to be a teacher? Do you want to be a friend? So there's that tone of voice then needs to be consistent across everything you do. So it needs to help tell your brand story, but it also needs to be in how you talk about on any of your brochureware, in your social media, on your emails. Keeping that consistency is absolute key. Then it's what do you look like? So this is where, especially for this industry, packaging is absolutely key, and your brand. So that is, in my humble opinion, that is where you really need to invest, right? So if you don't invest in your brand and your packaging, why are your customers going to invest in your product? So you've got to give as much as you get from those guys. So think about that. Think about investing in what you look like on shelf, and potentially some photos, some really great professional photos that tell your story. So it's not just reliant on the person that's saying it. as well. So that would be my key for investment. The other thing too is the company you keep. So today is a really good example of the company you keep. So in an amazing industry, work with everybody else. Use Bintani, Bintani experts, supporters of industry, quality. If you can sidle up next to those guys, you're a step ahead against anybody else to start with, because you're a part of the company you keep. That's a part of your story and part of brand. So who's listening to my story? So this is where it starts talking about the broader challenges that marketers have at the moment, and it's getting harder and harder. So there are two main things that I'll talk about in this bit is keeping your customers front of mind, but remembering how busy they are, how much they've got going on. There is a new term called busyness as part of business. Obviously play on words, but it is actually about that state of overwhelmed. The to-do list that never ends, the social media that's coming at me, all the mediums that are coming at me, being in the car, I can't have quiet time unless I turn everything off and my phone off and my podcasts off, and even the billboards that are talking to me, or that everything is coming at me all the time. So that state of busyness is something that all of our customers are going through. So we can't expect too much from them. We need to do the entertaining. We need to lean in. We need to have a good story that is unique, that connects with them. And it needs to be at the right time and the right place. So consider things like your website, for example. So if you've got someone to your website, these people are busy. They've taken time out of their hectic schedules. They've put down TikTok and the doom scrolling, and they are looking at your website. If it takes 30 seconds to find what they want on your website, they're out, and it's hard to get them back. So you need to make sure that you are connecting with them quickly. You are telling your story quickly. You have something that's relevant and engaging and relatable for them. So busyness is key. Don't underestimate how busy people are, and don't expect too much from them. They don't owe you anything, unfortunately. And then the other one is personalisation. There's such a bigger expectation now for people, they're not going to engage with you unless you're actually doing something that's specific to them. So if I go back to the start when thinking about customers and how we connected, how do we use that and those connection points for those different types of customers to have that personalisation connection, make them feel like we're actually talking to them. And this is where you need to think a little bit broader here, right? So if one of our persona groups was young boys and girls, and they drink at home. So what are we doing for them? So in communications, it might be that we start talking to them about, I've gone blank, but we might start, or maybe it's about product, sorry. Maybe we start thinking about, we know that they're then going to go on travel. Right? So we need to think about what's the travel piece. What are they taking along? Do they need, maybe it's a story on, the guy that comes with a 6-pack, and if he only drinks one, he takes the rest of them home. No one likes that guy. That might be a way to engage and connect with them as well. Or it might be the beer connoisseur. What detail are we giving them so that they engage with you? What do we need to talk to them? So you can see we need to keep our consistent brand story, but we need to talk to people in different ways on how we've built that connection. Where does my story live? So I imagine there's probably half and half-ish of business to business and direct to consumer. All of this still applies. Okay, so no matter who your customer is, you still need to know everything about them and how you can connect with them. But what are the channels that you're going to find these guys? In this industry, a lot of it's going to be on the shelf, right? If you're not in Dan Murphy's bad example, but if you're not in one of the big guys, then what does your shelf look like? Is that where your website is? Is that where you're showcasing your channel, your product? Definitely packaging. We've talked about that. And that is really key. But this is where the social media comes in as well. So one thing I always say about social media is you need to be there, but you don't need to be everywhere, right? So again, think back to that customer. Where are you going to find them? Where do they want to talk to you? Or where do they want to be heard? Where do they want to hear from you? That posting, you don't want to spam people. There's nothing worse. We need to think of ourselves, put ourselves in that customer thing as well. There's nothing worse than getting an email twice a day selling me something. I'm not going to engage in that. And I might engage with it the first time, but I'm definitely not reopening it. And so then you lose them. So this relationship needs to be a two-way street. We need to be really conscious that these customers have given us their email address, key to their home, in a sense. We need to be really respectful of that. We also need to remember here that socials are your proof. A lot of people are going to go to your socials before they're even going to go to your website, because it's where your community lives as well. It's where all the stories you're telling. It's the broader part of your story. And you don't need to post. So I talked about posting too little or too much. You don't need to post. Certainly don't need to post every day. It depends on, again, your audience and what you're trying to sell. But 2 posts a week versus 5 posts a week, if they're done really well with really quality images and really great storytelling, is well and truly enough. So don't get caught up because other people are posting so much or there's so much content. Don't feel like you need to keep up. Just find your own space and own that space. Be strategic about it, be smart, and be that little bit special when you are posting. And the other piece is data capture. So I mentioned before, if they're giving you their email, this is now the phone number that we used to, get back in the day, right? They're giving you your email. That is a big thing. Now, they might, depending on how much they want to engage with you, they might give you a business email that they actually look at every day, or they might give you a Gmail, potentially a Hotmail, right? They're going to be a lot harder to catch up. But we've got to be really respectful of that. Go back to that busyness. People are busy. We need to give them a reason to connect to us. We need to remember that it's a two-way street. Any relationship, if we just talk to people or we just sell at people, we are not going to get that engagement and we're not going to get the open rates ongoing. We need to think about how we connect with them and how we keep that connection and that loyalty. So now you've got your story, you know your customer, you understand that they're really busy and they need personalisation, and you understand where your story can live. How does it convert? Those 4 things. So if you can do those 4 things well, you know your customer, you've worked out how they want to connect with you and how they want to engage, you have an authentic and unique story to anybody else in the market, you're speaking to your customer in a relatable and tailored way that means that you're connecting, you're memorable, you're creating those stories and those actions, and that they want to hear more. They will continue to open the emails, they will continue to follow you on social media, and they'll continue to buy from you. And you've engaged with them on the channels of where they are, but also where they want to see you. Now the piece, that's your marketing piece. All right, it's as easy as that. Tick that off. This is where your product really needs to come in, right? So you need to make sure that your product is creating an experience now that is doing all the things that you said in your story, engaging in the right way, making sure that they're having the best experience possible. Then you've got them. Because then you just go back and you just repeat that. It's a bit of a flywheel. You just keep that and you keep that consistency. Like I said, you evolve your story over time. When it's still not talking about Addy Dazzler the cobbler at Adidas, they're definitely talking about other things. It's evolved over time, but it still is your core. So I go back to that question that I asked before. Do you think you need to dance on TikTok? So what I want you to think about is, if you're thinking about your customer now, are they on TikTok, for one? Is it a platform that they want to engage with you on? Think about your product and what you're trying to sell to them. Think about your own brand story. Is anyone here a good dancer? I know I'm not, and I also don't want to make a fool of myself. And is it a place where people really, really want to hear from you? Or do they just want to doom scroll and look at, cats or dogs, or, dogs' reaction to when someone says the word walk. Those are the types of things that are on TikTok. So yes, there's definitely a space for some people to be on there, but only if you can answer all of those questions and it makes sense. So that's Marketing 101 in 20 minutes or so. Anyone questions, thoughts?
I'm back here, so here we go, Sabrina.
Glasses.
Hi, Misha. My name's Sabrina Kunz. I'm from the Independent Brewers Association. So we represent the sort of 650 plus independent brewers. And I think, and I'm not quite sure how to phrase this question, but most of our members can't afford a marketing person. Mm-hmm. Somebody's posting twice a day. And actually the story we need to tell is not super positive right now. So we've just gone through a major election campaign and we're trying to say, dear consumer, please continue to support local, even though it's becoming really expensive. And in your reality, in a cost of living crisis, we still want you to choose the values, the reason you come to our venues. And our members are really good at telling the story. 3 people in a garage. The storytelling is excellent. The connection is excellent. But we're actually facing a pricing problem.
Yep.
And so we've had a number of our small breweries say, I don't want to tell my members that 50% of this is tax, because they're just doom scrolling. I don't want to tell my customers, they don't want to hear that from us. But if the customers aren't activated about that, as small businesses, we're not going to see the change we need at a government level. So how do we tell the story at a brewery level to our engaged customers who want to buy our products without turning them off? So I use the analogy of like live animal exports. It's not a fancy story, but we still need people to engage. What are your recommendations at a business level to talk to consumers about sort of the challenges they're facing as a small business in this environment?
Yeah, look, not an easy answer.
Yeah, I know, sorry.
That's okay. I think, look, you're not the Lone Ranger in dealing with a cost of living crisis at the moment. That's pretty standard. But I think it's about, again, going back to consistency, understanding your customers. So, yeah, it is expensive at the moment. So don't hide away from that. Like, cost of living is tough. But how do you, whatever product you're selling, how do you still form part of that lifestyle for them? What is it that you're trying to engage with them about? Like, it might be, maybe they're not drinking 4 nights a week. Maybe they're just drinking hard 2 nights a week. I don't know. Maybe it's when it's more of a social occasion. So you start leaning in your content to be more about the social occasion. So it's understanding, again, they may not be buying as much from you, but how do you make sure they're buying your product when they are buying from that industry? That's a very broad way to talk through connection. So again, it's customer. Now I'll go back to those steps again. It's still applying that same thing. If I talk to not sell you my business, but there is a big problem in marketing at the moment because as a function, everybody's going out there and asking for the unicorn marketing coordinator that can design, copyright, do strategy, do your packaging. It's kind of impossible. You wouldn't do it in any other function, right? So it is really important to invest in marketing. Now, I talked about it doesn't mean you need a full team. There are consultants out there. My business runs it as an outsourced marketing, so you get the full team for the same price as a coordinator is how we look at it. Because I'm a passionate marketing nerd who loves it and doesn't want to see the next generation be burnt out so quickly because they're being blamed for marketing not working because they can't do it all. But I also think it's about not trying to do it all, right? So you don't necessarily need, early days, you don't need a full marketing person in there. So you need to understand where your best channels are. So it might be, and I would joke about TikTok, don't even try to do TikTok if you don't have decent resource at the time. It is a beast. It is really hard to connect. And when you can invest in it, it's a fantastic platform, but it is really tricky. Stick with Meta. Do Instagram really well to tell your story. If you do that, you post once or twice a week. You probably do need to put a little bit of money behind it because Mark Zuckerberg wants to make money these days, so otherwise he'll hide everything you do. Invest in that, but But invest in that first, establishing your story, your brand. Like I said, get some professional photos. They are key to helping tell your story. So just be smart about how. Don't try and be everywhere. Be smart and be special. And the other piece I'll go back to is understand your broader group. So I know, we're all friends in the room today, but we're potentially competitors outside of that as well. So think about how you're different. What's that gap? How can you really have an impact by being something that somebody else isn't? So that's how you'll stand out. And I go back to cost of living. We're all in that cost of living, but they're still buying. Right? People are still spending money. You just need to make sure they're spending money on you and not your competitors. Did that answer that very long, challenging question?
I'm not going to give her the mic again. We probably need to wrap up, but thank you so much. That was very enlightening.